Welcome to the Edinburgh World Writers Conference, the Lisbon edition. This is the 12th of a series of Edinburgh World Writers Conferences taking place around the world during this year. 50 years ago, in 1962, there was an iconic gathering of writers at the International World Writers Conference in Edinburgh, and it included leading writers of the time, including Rebecca West, Muriel Spark, Lawrence Dorrell, and Norman Mailer, among many others. They gathered to discuss issues about writing and about society in what became a defining moment in the history of international literary dialogue and debate. And so 50 years later, in August 2012, in an international partnership between the Edinburgh International Book Festival and the British Council, contemporary writers came together at the Edinburgh World Writers Conference in Edinburgh to revisit and explore the same themes that were discussed in 1962. Those same themes were found to be as relevant today as they were 50 years ago. And then, since September last year, the World Writers Conference has begun an amazing journey, travelling all over the world. Altogether, there will be 14 participating countries, and Lisbon in Portugal is the 12th event. This is giving writers across the world an opportunity to engage in debate and to talk about their writing and the relationship it has to contemporary life. It will return to Edinburgh for a plenary session later this year. Our world has changed a lot since 1962, particularly with the rise of technology. And the opportunities presented by the internet and the rise of social media platforms such as Twitter mean that we can involve many more people in this debate. And right now, this event is being live streamed around the world. And there are people in the audience who are blogging and who are tweeting. And when it comes for an opportunity for you as an audience to ask questions of our speakers, of our writers, there will be also an invitation for those people out there around the world to contribute and ask questions as well. I'd like to draw your attention to the website and the Twitter hashtag. If you want to see this debate, or you want to see some of the other conferences that have gone on around the world, then have a look at the Edinburgh World Writers Conference.org website. And if you're someone who likes tweeting and you want to tweet while you're in the audience here, the hashtag is WorldWritersConf, WorldWritersConf. And we'd love you to do that. Okay. I would very much like to hand over very soon to our keynote speaker today. We have, as you know, two sessions. The first session is about the title of the session is Should Literature Be Political? And I'm very pleased to welcome José Rodrigues dos Santos, who hardly needs an introduction from me. He's extremely well known to you as an audience, both as a writer and as a journalist. I would also like to welcome Ruth Coelho. Ruth is both a lawyer and a journalist and a writer, and she has kindly agreed today to chair this event, so that once José has delivered his keynote address, she will encourage you as an audience to ask questions about the subject, should literature be political? Before I finish, I would just like to thank Appel very much for their collaboration in making this event happen. Thank you.
Boa tarde. Este é um evento organizado pelo British Council, portanto, foi-me pedido para escrever o meu texto em inglês, mas eu vou fazer a tradução em direto para português, de maneira que não precisam de se assustar. The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, de Agatha Christie, é considerado por muitos como sendo o melhor romance de crime jamais escrito. Conta a história de como Hercule Poirot investigou um crime, um assassínio, e surpreende-nos quando ele identifica o autor desse homicídio. O livro Rendezvous with Rama, de Arthur C. Clarke, é considerada, ou melhor, é o romance de ficção científica mais premiado de sempre. Conta a história de uma nave espacial não identificada que cruza o sistema solar e deixa no seu rastro mais perguntas do que respostas. O ensaio sobre a cegueira, de José Saramago, é frequentemente apontado como um dos melhores romances do século XX na literatura mundial contemporânea, portanto. E conta a história de uma súbita epidemia de cegueira em Lisboa. Para além da evidente qualidade destes livros, uma qualidade que emerge tanto da qualidade da sua história como da qualidade da sua escrita, o que é que estes livros têm em comum, na realidade? A resposta é: nenhum deles é político. Mesmo José Saramago, que nunca escondeu o facto que era comunista e um comunista ativo, jamais escreveu um romance evidentemente político. Então, o que é isso de um romance político? A política não tem necessariamente a ver apenas com partidos políticos, como poderemos imediatamente presumir, mas antes com a atividade relacionada com a gestão da sociedade. Política é a gestão da sociedade, é a atividade que faz a gestão da sociedade. As decisões e as ações que nos afetam,
affect us, but also the ideas and the concepts. And in fact, these give us the basis for decisions and actions. We can find many novels of quality that have a clear political message. Madame Bovary by Gustave Faure questions the social anonymity of feminine adultery in the 19th century. 1984 and Animal Farm by George Orwell are powerful metaphors written of communist dictatorships. The Crime of Father Amaro by Asad Karaj brings us a strong criticism of the hypocrisy of the Catholic Church regarding the priest's celibacy. And The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck shows us the misery spread throughout the unregulated capitalism in the aftermath of the Great Depression. We can say that The Crime of Father Amaro is a superior novel to the essay on blindness, just because it has a political message. Can we honestly say that Animal Farm is more literary than The Book of Illusions, just because Orwell's novel has a political message, whereas Paul Orson does not? And by the way, the Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown, is it a political novel? How can we say that the Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown is not a political novel if that novel deals critically with deep political issues such as who was Jesus Christ, how was his religion created because of political objectives, what is the woman's role in the religious political power, and what is the Opus Dei really? These are not easy issues, but they lead us to different directions and help us clarify things a little bit. A novel can be literary without an obvious political message, and the fact is that the novel with a political message is not necessarily a quality novel. And now, by the way, who decides what a quality novel is? Is it the Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown a literary novel? Who can say that it is? And in fact, who can say that it is not? Me? Jill over here? You, our friends back home, the newspapers, a commission for good literary taste. Who decides this? And who belongs to that commission? How are we elected to that good literary taste commission? Do each one of us have to obey and accept the critical judgment of such a commission? How often do commissions that have come up throughout history have wrongly assessed a work of art? Nobody wanted to know about the poetry of Fernando Pessoa when he was alive. And nowadays he's considered the height of contemporary Portuguese poets. Dashiell Hammett was considered in his time as a popular writer of second rate, but nowadays his Maltese Falcon is assessed as a classic. In his height, Pinheiro Chagas was acclaimed as an immortal author, but nowadays nobody's even heard of him unless those who lived in Mozambique and the avenue by his name. If we analyze a little bit deeper the issue of knowing what and what is not literature, we find once again many questions and no answers. So let's go back to our starting point. Should literature be political? Well, some might say that this is the same as asking, should art be beautiful? Of course, art has to be beautiful. But the question is, can't we create ugly art? No, we cannot. If it's ugly, it's not art. It's a failed attempt of getting art. This is an interesting point, because through the definition of something that to be artistic has to be beautiful, the French artist Marcel Duchamp presented in a New York exhibition in 1917 his last artistic work, which he called La Fontaine, or The Fountain. And La Fontaine was in fact a urinal made in an industrial plant, a urinal like we find, not the ladies, but the gentlemen in any public toilet anywhere. He got one of those urinals and exhibited in the art exhibition in New York in 1917. La Fontaine created something very controversial because he introduced into the world a new concept, the concept that art can be disgusting. It is ugly, but it is still art. Marcel Duchamp showed us something very powerful. He told us that a work of art is what the artist decides. So, what is a literary work? Well, it's whatever the author decides. Each one of you, our friends, the newspapers, the so-called Commission for Literary Good Taste, may like it or not, it doesn't matter, and it's not even relevant, because art can be ugly and still be art. Art is what the artist decides. The literary work is what the author decides. In the literary work, it can be political or not, but and even so still be a literary work. Should literature be political? Well, in fact, what does that matter? It is political if the author so decides, and not, and it is not if the author so decides as well. The quality of a book is not connected to its political message, the same way that the artistic quality of sculpture is not tied to its beauty. There are different issues, or are they? So, what is a political novel? Can the Mother of Roger Croat by Agatha Christie, a very simple story, even though interesting, shows us a criminal investigation, can it some way be a political novel? Well, if we take a look, well, this book gives us a political message, even though probably not even its author is aware of that. And that message is very simple. No, thou shalt not kill. How more political can a message be? Thou shalt not kill is a political order given by the most important governor of all, God Almighty himself. It's a pure political message created for social management. Thou shalt not kill. The French sociologist Louis Tourset once wrote that when a woman goes into a shoe shop and buys high-heeled shoes, she is doing a clear ideological declaration. She's making a declaration by using high-heeled shoes. She's expressing her idea of what society is and what her role is in society. And how political can something exist that is more than this? So the real issue is not, in fact, if literature should be political or not. The real issue is, could it be any other way? Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Before anything else, well, picking up on José's words, my opinion on this topic, well, I'm a little bit biased because my first book has a political message. It has to do with masonry. That's why my position is somewhat suspicious to talk about this topic. Obviously, all books and each author decides what they want when they are writing or when they are making a literary work. They have that freedom, and it could be no other way. And obviously, every author, when they're doing their literary production, in this case a novel, the author is, before that, is a citizen and is influenced by the society surrounding him. So if we are in a regime of oppression, totalitarian, it is obvious that the author will be influenced and write about the politics because it's what surrounds them, or religion, or this moment that we're going through an economic crisis. The authors have that influence and could be another way because we're all citizens. In my case, of my novel, the influence of politics, and if a novel should be political or not, and also by continuing what José said, if that determines the quality or not of a novel, the quality of a novel or its acceptance always depends on the reader. The reader is the judge of any novel, if it falls into oblivion or not, or if it lasts, if it stands the test of time. And obviously, what every book and every author does when they write is to create a sensation. They want to provoke a reflection and awaken ideas among the public. And if the message is political, obviously, they want, in one way or the other, something to change in the reader's mind. And that's the most important, whether it is a political novel or not. The utopia that we all have when we write or when we do any other kind of art form is to change the mentality of the public. I can remember, for example, the word as an intervention weapon in the music and songs of Zeca Afonso before our democratic regime. It was an intervention weapon, and we have Maria Teresa Horta, for example, and several authors. Manuel da Fonseca, Álvaro Cunhal himself wrote some novels. And they were all influenced by the time they lived in and the context, the social, economic and political context where they were inserted. So the question, if literature should be political or not, I answer that no. Literature should be what the author decides. The author has the freedom and the self-determination to choose to feel first and then choose to write second. And obviously, the message will more be accepted more or less if it is according to their reality and the reality they live in. José Rodrigues Santos mentioned a very interesting point of art being ugly, or if you can make ugly art. Well, art is exactly that, which is to provoke and awaken ideas and provoke sensations. If an author, when they write, cannot provoke those sensations, then it is a failed book, it is a failed work. More than knowing if a novel can be political or not, is knowing if the novel is able to or not to provoke those sensations and awakening of ideas within the public. I think that is the answer to our question if a novel can be political or not. Well, after having listened to us on this, both José and myself would like to know your opinion regarding these issues, not only if literature should be political or not, but also what art can provoke in people and the message that art can provoke, as well as the issue of what a true novel is. And up to what point a novel can be literary or not, and a literary work has that political message or not.
Desculpe, eu não posso falar português. But I was interested. It seems that there's a tension between what you're saying, that you were talking about the self-determination of the writer and the ability of them to control the message of their literature. But what seems perhaps more striking in what José is suggesting is that whether a writer likes it or not, or knows it or not, the work is political. So no matter what the writer thinks they're doing, their literature might be doing something quite different. And I wonder what your response might be to that observation.
I will answer in Portuguese. Sorry. The self-determination of the writer must prevail over everything else. A writer has always the last word, because that's what is in his heart and mind. So his opinion should always prevail, even in spite of the circumstances around him.
And could I a quick follow-up? José, do you agree with that, or do you think that a writer may have no idea of the politics that their literature might be portraying or putting out there?
Sim, efetivamente eu penso que...
Yes, in fact, I think that it's a different stance. As you said, and very well, I think that each author, when they have only written one book, it may be a love story, a basic one, but when writing it, he is making a political statement, even not being aware of this fact. Agatha Christie was a clear example. She is somehow perpetuating on an investigation on a murder. This means that crime is a bad thing and killing a person is a bad thing. So this is a political declaration. Sometimes we are not aware of this, and this is an interesting reflection. It's not just about the world of literature. It is about our condition of human beings. But in my case, my work as a journalist, sometimes we have to be neutral. But what does this mean? So if I start the news with one piece of news and not another, I am making a judgment. So I start with the news that Minister A made an act of corruption. So I'm saying that corruption is bad, of course, and this is a political statement. So all that we do in life, even when we do not understand that, is impregnated of values, political values and political stances. So when the author is going to write, he says, I'm going to write a novel that's not political, and that's what she thinks, because very often it is political, but he may not be aware of the underlying message, the political message in the novel. That's why I said at the end of my presentation, do we have an option? Can we write something that's not political? No. Even the simplest love story has a conception of what society must be. So this is embedded somehow in the whole notion of what politics is. And sometimes we're not aware of this. We do not have sound. The gentleman is not speaking into the microphone. Masonry. The gentleman has not the microphone on. We are very sorry, but the gentleman's microphone is off. So is able to overcome the situations of some writers that take 7 years to write a book, as Miguel de Moraes, who wrote that book about Saint Tomé for 7 years because he had to go to places physically, really go there, travel. When reading José Rodrigues dos Santos' books, I was very excited because I enjoy reading and I enjoy very much your writing. And can literature be political? Well, what you wrote, all that you wrote is very to the point. And indirectly, your books are about politics. They are political books. To us readers, we can see there some criticism, some political criticism. But what I see also is the lady has written on Masonry, other people write about other. I have never read a book, a novel, on investigation or research about the spin-offs created in the universities. Some spin-offs created in the universities will just trade existing products. Very often they will not resort or to their own things. They will just resort to the innovation of others. And when these people are in high places, sometimes the works they create just slow the development of our country. So I have never seen a journalist or a writer who's writing in researching universities. What happens inside universities? Because universities are consuming public money. And do they produce good things? Yes, they do. Creative things, but also lousy things. So I think this would be a way to draw the attention of the public for this issue, writing a novel with these issues. So I agree with the lady when you said that not every book must be political. But if the book is political, it will develop the country and it will generate jobs. Because if it is a political book, it will have somehow to find out things that are hidden and forgotten. So I want to say that our country is backwards. So if the writers wrote about these issues that have been coming to the fore, it would be very interesting, and I think that would attract the public. If it was written as a novel, not as political information on television, but a book that somehow and indirectly would research the reasons why this country or Portugal is how it is. Thank you very much for your intervention. I would like to answer. I don't know if it was a question or an opinion. I would just like to refer to your words and say my position or my stance was not to agree or disagree with the political nature of novel. There are political novels that have their function to awaken people, to create, to bring about new ideas and raise the awareness to reality. And there's all writers that live in connection with reality. I do not think that the function of a writer is the awakening of the public. But yes, I think that they can study those issues that you mentioned, because the written words is a weapon. And I think that we can awaken somehow or stir mentalities. I was a student in the university not long ago, so I know well what's going on in the universities. So really, that could be a fantastic theme for a fiction novel. Thank you.
Boa tarde. Havia aqui, se pudéssemos voltar à questão que estavam a discutir o senhor daquele lado com o senhor José Rodrigues dos Santos, relativamente à parte da política, à presença da política na literatura. Sou obrigado a concordar sem
without margin of doubt, without being in detriment of Ruto Coelho, because I believe that politics is present in literature in a uniform way. Nevertheless, I believe that we must consider 2 points that I don't know if they were spoken or discussed as clear as possible. At least the way I see things. I think that politics ends up being at least a subcategory of literature or literary tag. It is presented in literature in the form of an ideological stairway, which comes not only, well, in 2 parts. The first part from the author. I think that the author has an artistic opinion that the artist decides. I'll read it first. In terms of this category, if we wish to call it that, of the literature. Then we have the second part. And I believe that this relationship happens like in some genetic diseases. They have a dominant part, and if anyone is present, well, we need to have the two, the pair, so that the disease can manifest itself. And yet the public has an opinion on the book when they have access to the work. I don't want to take too much time. They have an opinion regarding the work, which is the result of the rules of society. It is the result of the state they live in. It is the result of the constitution, the laws, etc., that panoply of weapons that we have for ourselves in society. And obviously, I don't want to say over here that books are an adventure for people who come from abroad. Well, we have just adventure books for teenagers. Will they have political interest, some kind of vocation? Should they have a vocation towards the way people should act in a group and standing before dangerous situations? There was another one in '84, like the Surprising New World, The Gentleman of the Flies, as an endless series of books and literary works, some novels, some more journalistic, that may have a clear political interest, and which is directly implemented by the author. But there are other books, I'm sure, that having no political interest given by the author end up having it because of the climate in which the social climate in which they are read and at the time they are read. And this can happen when it is written, and this usually happens when the author wants it to have a political impact as well as much later, 100, 200, 300, 400 years later. I think that literature can have a political nature. Not only can it, but it has to have a political nature, in my opinion. That was just to give you my agreement, but to explain that what I got from both your presentations. And just another comment. There's a question which I think Ruth placed it, which is regarding the literary value that that political category imposes. So, considering your opinion that politics is always present, I wasn't very much enlightened in which parts can you add or remove literary work, literary value, the presence of that political character. The presence of politics in a novel, I think, neither adds nor removes quality. The quality, and referring to the expression by Jose, the good taste commission, this is always given by the reader as a last resort, whether it works, when it lives 100, 200, 300, 400 years, it is not really up to the author. When the author writes, and that's what I was trying to transmit earlier on, when the author writes, they want to awaken people's minds, they want to provoke a reaction. Well, whether politics brings quality or not to novel, quality is intrinsic to the writing of the author. If the author has no quality, even if they write on politics, or cooking, it will continue not having quality. Good afternoon. There were two issues that were raised here that seem to be very interesting. The first one is, well, I would answer in a very simple way, which is, I think that the title of the conference is wrong. It shouldn't be a question, should literature be political? The question should be, can literature not have a political nature? And in Zerdik's opinion, probably not. And I tend to believe with that, to agree with that. Not only literature, but any action that we might make in society will probably have a political nature always, even if we don't always realize it. This is one of the issues, but that one was clearly approached on by José Rodrigues Santos. Another interesting question José Rodrigues Santos raised here was the issue of how to assess art and literature, and this question also seems to be interesting to me. Well, we ask if art has to be beautiful, if it can be ugly. In my opinion, it doesn't have to be anything for anybody. As Ruth said, art has to awaken some kind of impact in people. I don't agree. Art does not have to awaken anything for whoever. And art is just the expression of the author or the artist, whatever it is. Whether it is beautiful, ugly, whatever, the author wanted to express themselves, and it did. That's what's art, regardless of who sees it. The issue that I often wonder, and for which I don't have a very well-defined answer, is to how assess the quality of art and literature. Should it be assessed by the impact that it has on people? In other words, art has an impact, and art for me is born right in the beginning when art comes from within the artist. The artist places something of themselves in art. It doesn't just apply a formula or a recipe, but they put something of themselves, of their feelings and their emotion. Now, should we assess it by the impact and that emotion that it has on others? That's one of the ways. Or should it be assessed by its peers who also practice the same kind of art? And the issue raised here is, I can have a book, for example, well, since we're talking about literature, I can have books that are very popular because they have an impact on a lot of people, and many people like them. But the peers who write books, the authors, might feel it's not original and brings nothing new to literature. So how do we assess the quality of literary work? Should it be by the peers or the acceptance that it has within the public? Thank you. Well, let me just say something about that quickly. It's, your question that you've raised is very interesting. Well, it's not an answer because there are no answers, but let me just say a little bit of what I feel about that. I once went to Coimbra, the University of Coimbra, and I was invited for a speech in the students in the course of literature, and the issue of quality was raised. And I had a reaction from the students who surprised me a lot. Well, when I raised the question, what is the commission of good taste? What are the criteria? So when I assess, I have a university professor, I have criteria to assess the students. So if we are trying to evaluate this, what are the criteria? And this is a very peaceful issue. There are no criteria. If I like it, it's good. If I don't like it, it's bad. And everybody thinks the way they think. And I found out that the literature students of University of Coimbra thought that there was a grid. And that reminded me of a book that was quite successful about 20 years ago with the professor, which was the Dead Poets Society. I'm sure many of you remember that. There is a scene in which Robin Williams is starting his book and said, well, let's open your book, page so. It's written here that poetry is assessed like this. You have to have metrics. This is quality work. This is quality poetry, etc. Those who abide by this metric. And everybody said yes. Well, pick up that manual and tear it up, all of it, because this makes no sense. So what I saw at the University of Coimbra is that the students believe in the manual. Instead of tearing it, but people still believe that we have charts, good taste commission. Each one of us, the opinion of each one of us is so good and so bad as the highest literary person on the planet. Obviously, the tastes can be educated in inverted commas, but in an educated taste, because we educate it in a certain direction. So the assessment of the artwork is an issue that you raised, which I consider fundamental, and to which nobody has an answer. We find commissions of good taste which determine what is good, what is bad, but I must say that I'm highly suspicious of this. It's already happened to me to think that somebody says so-and-so is good, is bad. And I say, okay, fine, okay, let me read, because everybody says that that's not, but it's not in my opinion, so I need to read it. As the opposite has already happened, and there are many cases like this. The other day, I spoke with Carlos Ruiz Larrafon from Catalonia. He wrote a book, The Shadow of the Wind. He said something very interesting, and he said, well, novels. He writes novels for youngsters and adult novels for adults. And I asked, did you write, do you prefer writing for children, young people, or adults? And then he answered, well, in fact, I like writing for youngsters first, because youngsters are more genuine. And adults already have a lot of twerks. For example, the latest book by so-and-so. I have the book. I have not read it. They can't even read it, but they have it at home to say that they have that author at home. So what he's saying is that the adult reader has a lot of prejudices and commissions of good taste, and not the youngster. The youngster takes a look and says, I don't like it, full stop, I can't write it, or I like it. So they are much more genuine. And that will give us an idea on what this is all about, how to evaluate if work is good or bad. In fact, it's everyone's opinion. And as I said, from my point of view, there is no good opinion and bad opinion. We have opinions, and they're all worth the same. So just one question. Is it difficult to hand out Nobel Literature Prizes? Well, let me tell you a story about the prizes. Okay. Well, we had an organizer of literary prizes who told me that, well, he said, well, I created the prizes, he's an entrepreneur, and I handed over to a known author to organize the prizes. And I surprised him once on the phone with a friend saying, well, take a look, you mentioned me in the book that you're going to write now, then you get the prize next year. And I thought that this was a conversation among friends where they influence themselves among each other. So something that you must take note of. Well, he told me this. I'm telling this firsthand of the sponsor of the prize. This is something interesting. Why do prizes in Portugal, when we hand out the prize, normally, for example, if you have a prize, the Oscar of Best Film of the Year, everybody is going to watch that film because they got a prize. Why? Because it is credible, it has credibility. We got used to when they say it's the best film and we take a look and the film is really good, but those Academy prizes are given out by peers. Precisely, that's my point. What I highlight over here is that the fact that the prize is credible because then, in our opinion, which is individual, belonging to each one of us, we tend to believe with the choice, to agree with the choice. And when we have literary prizes, either theoretically, it would be automatic that it would sell, but then it doesn't sell. How many books do we know that have prizes and they don't sell? People don't believe. They say, well, a Portuguese film got the Venice Award, and we go to the cinema theaters and it's empty. Nobody believes in that prize. It's already happened to me. Well, I watch a film that's supposed to be good, I fall asleep halfway, and then I never make that same mistake twice. Whereas we have the Booker in England is a credible prize. They say that the book is good, we start reading, and the book is really good. So there's a coincidence between the jury's opinion and the public opinion. For example, in France, where the Goncourt Prize was very credible, and nowadays its credibility has been destroyed. First of all, because they started giving awards to books that weren't good in the circle of friends, and then it was discovered that there was an arrangement between publishers which they alternate the prizes. And nowadays we have a book winning a Goncourt award and nobody takes note because it has lost its credibility. So just to talk to you a little bit about quality, very often the prize is only credible if it evaluates, and if I give my opinion that we as public identify ourselves generally with it. It doesn't mean that the public is right or not. What I'm saying is that each one of us has our own opinion. And when we trust the prize when the works that receive that prize, books, films, etc., coincide with our opinions, and we remove its credibility when it doesn't coincide.
I know there were more opinions. There was a lady saying something.
I really wanted to ask you a question about your craft as a writer and how politics gets in there. So do you start off with a good story and you write a good story and the politics creeps in? Or do you start off with an idea, maybe it's political, maybe it's a social idea, and then you weave the story around that? How do you operate as a writer?
Well, I think that my process is similar to other writers. It always starts with an idea. The idea is really political, well, except because everything we do is political. If I write a book on Islam, on fundamentalist Islam, it's a political book. Maybe that was not my initial intention. I wanted to analyze how an Islamic fundamentalist thinks, but then it is a political book. The Last Secret on Jesus, for instance, that's the book that's always started like that. But the only book that right off was political was the last one on the hand of the called The Hand of the Devil, where politics, economy, banking, and everybody somehow concocted to create this crisis that we are now being victims of. But what I enjoy doing, and I think my readers enjoy it, is that I try to create situations. It makes no sense for me to saying, well, Joachim is a liar. No, that's not how I go. I show a situation where he's lying, and the reader, him or herself, will start building the profile of the character and of the situations, of the political situation itself that the novel involves. I would just like to say something in terms of your words. As a reader, sometimes I think that critics make some sort of bullying on writers. Very often, the critique in Portugal is just they just say bad things instead of highlighting what is good. They just criticize, even in terms of films and literature. We see that all over critics sometimes in Portugal do not do the same as elsewhere. They just highlight what is bad, not the other way around. But I want to congratulate you. I have read several of your books. I love them. But there was something that came to my mind when I was listening to you. Where does for you lie the difference between morale and politics? Because all the books express a vision on the way people in society move about and develop, but maybe they are not always political, but they always have morale. So I think there we are entering a field of the definition of expressions. When we are talking about politics, what are we talking about? That's why I said we are not only talking about political parties, we are talking about social management. A lawyer makes politics, a doctor as well, a teacher also. If we define politics as the management of society, thoughts, actions, decisions that all are all involved in the fabric of society. So it is much broader than the notion of politics per se. So very often the frontiers between words are too blurred. That's one of the characteristics of nature. When we say Caesar crossed Rubicon, what does this mean? It does not mean Caesar, it means Caesar's army. But if there was one soldier that went over the Rubicon, can we say just one soldier? And what about 2 or 19? When can we... when we look at things in detail, and Buddha mentioned this, when we see things that initially seem clear, then they are too blurred. So morale and politics are different things, but what is the frontier between them? And then we can talk about ideology. What separates these 3 concepts? But these concepts are interwoven. And like borders are never just a clear and clean-cut line. So it depends on what are we talking about when we talk about politics and morale. In the stricto sensu, not all novels are political novels, but when I said that all the decision, all the actions, all the decisions, all the actions that manage society are political, well, they manage society, so they are political. Even morale is somehow political as well.
I think maybe you're talking about different things. Maybe Root is talking about a call to action in political terms, and you're talking about reflexive politics that reflects the society. And my committee of taste has met, and it's decided the Da Vinci Code is a very bad book. So there you are. That's one opinion. And I think if you don't think it's a very bad book, you haven't read it, because it's awful.
Yeah. Well, as I said, it all depends on how you define words, you know. Yeah. That's the concepts. Falem agora ou calem-se para sempre, né?
Please, to speak now or be silent forever.
Já agora não. Não, é só.
Well, I think the fundamental point of all this was just mentioned. What are we talking about here? Because I think the definition of politics is an old one. It remains unchanged throughout times. And it does not only include political parties, social classes. It does not involve only the type of government, be it a democracy, monarchy, whatever. All is incorporated in a wide noun, which is politics. Of course, that moral goes in, but morale is a political weapon. Although, at the same time, we cannot dissociate it.
Da política a nível mais baixo da política, quando nós separamos.
When we separate politics from morale, we see that morale is always overvalued. Well, he's a Muslim, he's a Christian, or he's left, he's right, but he should not kill. So there is a given set of concepts on morale that are consensual, but that does not mean that morale is the same all over and that it is not subject to political pressure and social discussion. So morale is connected to politics, and so, of course, that it goes hand in hand, they go hand in hand with each other. So I think we should always understand that all that is somehow social has somehow a political nature. I think that you spoke rightly, and this brings to mind another concept, the concept of culture. A while ago, I was talking about Divine Fury, my novel on Islam, and it was rather interesting. Last week, I was in France presenting my last book, because it's a novel on Jesus Christ, and journalists, those terrible people, journalists, the question that they always made was, are you Christian? And I started saying, I am not a Christian going to church, believing that Jesus is God, but I am a cultural Christian. And why do I say this? When I wrote Divine Fury, before writing it and making my research, my idea was a religion must always be pacifist. So a prophet always appeals to peace and so forth. And when I started studying Islam, I understood it was not like that. Islam is not like that. It is not a pacifist religion. There is a book by Ayatollah Khomeini saying Islam is not a pacifist religion. So saying violence is not a solution for any circumstance, but in Quran we find orders to kill, to maim, to behead, to lots of things. So this has to do with what divine justice is for them. In the case of Christianism, the idea is those who have never sinned should throw the first stone. If you are slapped on the face, just, give them the other face. Love thy neighbor, but I also say love thy enemy. And so violence should never be a solution in some religions, but not in others. So when I was studying this, I understood that in 2003, when we saw the rallies of the left against war, I saw that violence is not the solution, and those posters that they carried around were somehow by Christian people. So embedded in ourselves, we have the culture of our society, and it is a Christian culture. So we cannot have illusions about this. And this is interesting because it stems from what I said. We have values, and very often we don't even know that they are values. Violence is never the solution, and we think this is universal, but it is not. The Jews even have stoning as a punishment for adultery. It's one of the first books of the Bible. So it's not pacifists. Buddhism says that violence and killing is never, ever the solution. But then what about the Crusaders? The Crusaders were disobeying their prophets, because nothing is written saying you should, when you are attacked, you should attack back. When a Muslim is in jihad, by decree of the Caliph, because jihad is illegitimate, when by the Caliph's decree, this person is disobeying the laws of his religion. We have to understand that cultures are different. And when I wrote that novel, I understood that many of the values that I held as universal are not. They belong to a given culture, and Christianism gives us a given culture, even if we are left-winged. So violence is never the solution, I think. We are saying lots of controversial things. You can answer back if you want.
Bem, então se calhar é melhor.
So, okay? So we should end this part of our conference. Thank you very much for having come. It was a great pleasure, and have fun in the fair.